Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Homage to the blessed, noble, and perfectly enlightened one.
Namo sadanto suchedoye alahari samya sampatoshi. 无上甚深微妙法，百千万劫难遭遇。我今见闻得受持，愿解如来真实义。Supreme and wondrous Dharma, subtle and profound, rarely is encountered even through billions of eons. But now we see and hear it and accept it reverently. May we truly understand the Buddha's actual meaning. 师父上人，各位师兄，大家阿弥陀佛。Venerable Master, Dharma friends, welcome to our Sutra lecture today. My name is Heng. Today is Sunday, the 16th of October, here in the Gold Coast of Queensland, Australia. It is Saturday night, the 15th, the Ides of October back in California, and welcome to our lecture on the Flower Garland Sutra, the Avatamsaka Sutra. To get started, we want to invoke spiritual presence. We want to invite the Buddhas and the bodhisattvas of the Flower Garland Assembly to draw near, so we do that with some music. And we do it in Chinese, so you can learn a little bit of Mandarin, practice your tones, and what you're going to be, we're going to chant it in Chinese, and the translation of what you're chanting is right there on the screen. So let's put our palms together if you want to do that, and invite the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the Dharma protectors, as they say, the Tianlong Babu, the eightfold pantheon of spiritual protectors, to draw near. Here we go. And because we are here in Australia, in the coast of southeastern Queensland, We want to acknowledge country, and we do that by saying that the Kumbumeri people of the Ugambi language group practice spiritual connections to land, to living beings, and to all creation here in this location for tens of thousands of years. Today we acknowledge them as traditional custodians of this land. We acknowledge them with gratitude, with sorrow, and with hope that we can move to a place of justice and partnership together. We acknowledge their wisdom and their elders, past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge as well all First Nations peoples whose sovereignty was never ceded. Indeed. All righty. So, again, welcome to our Sutra lecture. What we're going to be doing today, we're going to be opening up the Flower Garland Sutras called the Da Fang Guang Fo Hua Yan Jing. We're in a chapter called the Praises in a Palace of the Suyama Heaven. Yemo Gong Dian Ji Zan Pin. Chapter 20 out of 40 chapters, so this chapter is right in the middle. And it's the preface, the prelude to something that's going to happen after this chapter, which is the Buddha is going to explain a particular teaching called the Shi Heng Pin, the 10 practices. And this Dharma, the 10 practices, is it's part of the bodhisattva path. This is how bodhisattvas practice. And that's one of the real glories. This is one of the high marks, the high water marks of what is called the Han Chuan Fojiao, the Chinese Mahayana tradition. And interestingly, this is something that's been catching my attention a lot. I've been teaching most of the time as a Buddhist monk now for, 47 years, 46 years. Most of the time I speak to non-Buddhists. A lot of the teaching that I do is to people who have no clue of what Buddhism is about. Or people who come to, let's say, an academic class. They enroll in a course at the local university here is Bond University. And while I haven't taught officially through Bond for a few years, I did indeed teach what was called Buddhist philosophy. And you could argue whether Buddhism is a philosophy or has a philosophy. Not the way we think of Westerners think of philosophy. It's different. I teach that group, that class, because it fits into the school's pedagogy, right? That's how they classify their classes. So, Buddhist philosophy, fine. That's the only choice you got. So, take Buddhist philosophy. We could call it Buddhist practice. We could call it Buddhism. We could call it Buddha Dharma. You'd be closer. But Buddhist philosophy, we'll take it. So what do you do in Buddhist philosophy? Well, I'm talking to mostly 19 and 20-year-olds who have never considered anything other than the religion of their parents. These are just barely out of their teens, young people. And so they don't have a clue. They have no idea, but they're open. Their minds are, they're asking the right questions. So they want to think about their lives. And so, good enough. That will get you in the door. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about our lives. Let's talk about the big questions, which if you remember, what were you thinking about when you were 19 and 20 years old? In my case, it was baseball and folk music and girls, mostly, at 19 years old. So your hormones are really strong at that point. So to come into a class with 20 to 30 other students and to have some authority guy or woman standing in front of the class and saying, "Let me ask you, who's in charge of your life?" And then stop. And yet, me? You? I don't know. Fate? Karma? Luck? God? Those are all answers I've heard. And so that's a good thing. And I can see as I ask these questions for these young people, it may be the very first time that these gears have started to turn. I'm pointing to my head, but the Chinese would say in the xin, they point to their hearts. This is where the thinking takes place. And you start to ask those questions. And if you've eaten in your mother's kitchen your whole life, maybe you moved out into a school dormitory and you eat in the cafeteria, but still you're very protected, you're very sheltered. And you don't have to have answers to questions like that. What's important? Right? What's important in your life? Tell me your priorities. Do I have priorities? Is that? I haven't had to ask that question. So this is appropriate. In the Chinese world, they call this qimeng. You're opening up the ignorance. You're opening up this dark space in the child's mind. It's a necessary step on the way to becoming an adult. And sadly, there are many, many, many millions of human adults who are already 40, 50 years old, but have never had to ask these questions. They've never had to have answers for themselves. So, back to the main thread here is, I'm in here we are in the palace of the Suyama heaven, which is the one, when the Buddha looked at the universe, he described the heavens as different levels and with names and different qualities to each of the heavens. So he has now come to this heaven called the Suyama heaven, which is the Shan Shi Fen, the heaven where time is well divided. And the way the Buddha described it is this heaven is above the sun and the moon. The way we're looking at the heavens, and our sun, how our sun, we have a sun in the middle, and then we have Mercury, and then Venus, and then Earth, and then Mars, and then Jupiter and Saturn, and then Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. And did anybody get out and see Jupiter recently? It was the closest it's been to the Earth in, 300 years? So visible to the eye, and people who had binoculars even, sometimes with their phones, could see the moons around Jupiter. Io and Pallas, what are the other ones? So anyway, the Buddha described the heavens as being as world systems. And so once you go beyond the sun and the moon, what do you light your day with? And the answer is the light that illuminates the gods who live in that level of heaven. The light comes from their bodies. How about that? So we're in that heaven, and the Buddha is going to explain the 10 practices. And as I was saying, as I do more of the explaining of Buddhism to people who've never heard of it before, what do you reach for? Well, you reach for a book often. Let's get a good textbook. People say, can I read something? You got something I can read about Buddhism? And the answer, yeah, we do. There's a lot of writing about Buddhism. Sadly, when you go out and pick up a textbook, most of them talk about the Buddha, that's good. Then they talk about what he taught, and it's the Four Noble Truths, 四谛法, 四圣谛, the Eightfold Path, 八正道, the 12 Links, 12因缘法, and they stop. Maybe they talk about nirvana, maybe they talk about something like samadhi. More and more, people want to know about meditation, mindfulness, that's what it is. But it's as if that's all the Buddha taught. Truly, this is not an exaggeration. The textbook that most college classes use to describe Buddhism is called What the Buddha Taught by a Sri Lankan elder named Venerable Rahula, Walpola Rahula. And it's a really nice book. It's well written, originally in English, it's not translated. And he bases himself, like Sri Lankan monks do, on Pali, the Indian language called Pali, Paliwan. And the Pali tradition is absolutely authentic, real Buddha Dharma, but it is not even half of the Buddhism in the world, which came not from Pali, but from Sanskrit originally, the Indian language called Sanskrit, when it was written down. The Buddha kept it in the oral tradition as long as he could. Then it was translated into what? Chinese, Korean, Japanese, into Tibetan, and then into English and the other languages that we're busily doing. We're going to be part of that today. You're taking part in a piece of Buddhist history today as we translate the Buddha Dharma from Chinese into English, and it was translated from Sanskrit into Chinese. So, people don't know about the bodhisattva path. And even to the point of you can go through an entire college class on Buddhism and never have heard of the Flower Garland Sutra or bodhisattvas and their path of training. Isn't that interesting? So there are historical reasons for that. Nobody's, quote, at fault. But it is a lack. It's a lack that we're hoping to make up for. What's the historical reason? Well, in 1949, monks pretty much couldn't leave China from that time on. Called the bamboo curtain fell. In Korea and Japan, that was not the case, and so Westerners who wanted to find out about Buddhism could go to Japan and learn what? Zen. So for the 20th century, from the 1950s to the end, if you wanted to know about Buddhism, pretty much you had a choice of Zen, or if you happened to get to Sri Lanka, you might have heard about that. That was it, with some notable exceptions. And one of those important historical exceptions was Master Xuanhua, Shang Xuan Xiahua, Lao Huashan. And he came out of China in 1949 and went to Hong Kong, spent 10 years in Hong Kong, then followed his own vows and his teacher's urging, his teacher's instructions, Master Empty Cloud, Shang Xu Xia Yun Lao Huashan, Xu Yun Lao Huashan, who sent him to America. And so Master Hua got to America, and from the time that he was actively teaching the Dharma for the next 30 years, every single night he said, "Let me tell you about the Mahayana tradition." And so he jiang jing shuo fa, explained the Dharma every night for 90 minutes, twice on Saturdays, twice on Sundays. This was a priority. Talk about priorities. Master Hua made it his priority to explain the Mahayana Sutras. And of course, he spoke in Mandarin, Chinese, and he needed translators. And so young people, myself included, started coming around and learned Chinese so that we could translate his explanations of the Bodhisattva path. So that's how we know about the Bodhisattva path, is through individual efforts like Master Hua's and his vows, where he said, I'm going to teach you about what the Buddha said. Let's find out if the Buddha speaks English. Did the Buddha speak English? Well, with a resounding yup. In my case, with an Ohio accent. More and more with an Australian accent. So the Buddha spoke Aussie accented English. She's right, mate. Can you see the Buddha saying, she's right? Yeah, so indeed. Let's find out for ourselves whether we can understand the Buddha's Aussie, Ohio, California accented English. Here we go. Today's text is right here. This is it. We've got 2 verses from a bodhisattva whose name is Jingjin Li Pusa, Forest of Jingjin Lin. I said Li. Jingjin Lin Pusa, Forest of Vigor. That's his name. We've been looking at his teachings. We have 2 more of his 10. Let me describe what's going on here. We're in a palace. We're in a palace of the Suyama heaven, as I mentioned, Yemo Gongdian, Yemo Tian Gongdian. And each bodhisattva, there we go, just a teaser, going to tease you, can't see it yet. So each bodhisattva, 10 bodhisattvas have arrived. They have a leader. His name is Gongdolin, Forest of Merit and Virtue. And he spoke first. He walked around the Buddha, probably with incense in his hands, and bowed, offered the incense, bowed down. Then he knelt and put his palms together, and he started to praise the Buddha, probably singing, probably chanting, and came from his heart. That's one of the things we discovered in our exploration here, is how individual these verses are. What the bodhisattvas choose to praise is each different and unique, and it's deep. Some of the stuff is not easy to, it's not ordinary, it's not, the Buddha is good, we praise you, the Buddha is great, we think you're terrific. There's that, but it's often much, much more profound. They talk about the nature of reality, for example. They talk about how worlds come into being. They talk about language and how it's only a superficial level. It has no relationship to the thing that it's referring to. And things like that, deep stuff. But they always wind up saying the Buddha, by teaching us the Dharma, has given us a path to end suffering. That's the point. It always ends up there. The Buddha did it himself. He came out from that process of death and rebirth called samsara, 生死. The Buddha ended it himself and reached a state beyond birth and death called nibbana, nirvana. That was good that he did that, but then it wasn't enough. He taught us how to do it ourselves. That's the good part. And so they say, good, thank you, Buddha, for doing that. Amazing that you were so unselfish, that you tried to get us to understand. And you know what? Mostly we don't. Mostly we don't understand. We muck around, we kind of listen with one ear, but we're really much more interested in what's on Netflix than we are in sitting and meditating with painful knees and our minds full of cotton wool and confusion. It's hard to get people to sustain practice long enough to actually change their state. But the Buddha gave us the path anyway. He explained the Tao and how to walk it. So it's worthy of praise. The bodhisattvas do that. Each one of these bodhisattvas talks about something different, and you can feel from their heart how what they're saying is relatable. It's authentic. This is their actual feelings about the Buddha as they're there kneeling. And so our job now, as 2,500 years later, is to use whatever language skills we have and tools to see if we can understand it. What is the Buddha saying is our best guess, and probably translators who follow after us will improve on our version of what the Buddha is saying. But then, can we understand what we think he's saying? That's the second question. What did he say, and how close can we get to what we think what the Buddha said? And then, is it understandable? So, I'll let you be the judge. Here we go. Forest of Vigor, Bodhisattva says, and these are verses that are chanted, so we'll use a tone to it. Here we go. Pi ru zhu shi jian, jie shao you zhong jin, xu kong wu sun bai, fo zhi yi ru shi. Just like among the worlds that cease to exist, when the fires burn at the end of the kalpa, while infinite space is not harmed by the fire, the wisdom of the Buddha is the same. All right? There we go. Take a look here. Piru, just like, for example, he's saying, here's an example. Zhu Shijian, worlds, plural, so think our world and other worlds. Jie shao you zhong jin. When the kalpa burns, they are done for good. Okay, shao, kalpa, eon, burning, has ultimate obliteration, gone. Xu kong wu sun bai, space itself, infinite empty space, right here in your hand, you've got a handful of space right there. The air itself, infinite space, wu sun bai, is not harmed at all. Nothing happens to empty space when a world burns up and is gone. Fo zhi yi ru shi. You know what? The Buddha's wisdom is the same. Okay. Buddha wisdom also like that. So, okay, what is he talking about? He's giving us a praise of the Buddha's wisdom. What's the Buddha's wisdom like? Okay, let me unpack that. So the Buddha described, he's taken a long look. So suddenly, let's say you're enlightened. Suppose you're the Buddha, okay? And this experience called enlightenment happens. And what do you see? You can see far. Your eyes open, you see far. You see worlds coming into being and going away. So your sense of time is altered. Time is really different when you have the Buddha's wisdom. You can see past your life, your body, your parents' body. You can even see the world around you. So in a time of climate disruption that we're in right now, people are saying if the temperature of the ocean, for example, rises another 2.5 degrees, basically the ice caps will melt and we'll lose Miami, we'll lose Manhattan, we'll lose San Francisco, and then most of Vietnam. Have you seen the maps that are projected that are low? Forget Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, they'll all be submerged. Big pieces of China, the mainland, will be, So, if that happens, we're talking about that now because why? It's foreseeable. We're on track right now to reach that climate, that temperature where ice caps melt. And if that happens, the planet will be fine. Nothing happens to the earth, just changes. It's the people who we're worried about trying to live through the next decade on the earth as we know it now. So add a lot of water and humanity has to move. And where do we go? Well, we crunch together. Most of Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico in America, most of the outback, western Queensland, plenty of room for people. The only problem is no food, no water. You can't grow, the outback doesn't grow crops. It grows camels and sandflies and rabbits. Oh my. So, yeah, problems ahead. We talk about Armageddon. We talk about apocalyptic views of when the earth just is no longer habitable for our species. The earth itself is still gonna, it's just breathing. Humans have only been, but you have a 12-hour clock. Humans have been on the planet for one fraction of the last minute. So, okay, but we're concerned. We worry about that. Where do we go? We have to give up our cars. We have to give up our phones because, there's no more electricity, et cetera, et cetera. Big problem. The Buddha said, yes, that's what I see. Not only humanity on this world comes to an end, but all worlds come to an end. He described the lifespan of worlds as cheng zhu huai kong cheng zai cheng, coming into being, abiding, going bad, decay and emptiness, leading to a rebirth of a world, and coming into being and abiding and decaying, and it's a cycle. He said, what's it like? He said, it's like a human being. What do we have? Sheng, lao, bing, si. Sheng, zai sheng. We are born, we mature, we get old, we die, and we're reborn. He said, it's a cycle. Buddha said, yeah, that's the way it is. I see it. So with his newly awakened eyes, he said, this is how it is. Now, he gave us more detail. there are signs as the changes happen. One of the signs of a world passing away is they talk about the end of the eon. At the end of the kalpa, there are disasters. There are disasters of wind, disasters of water, and disasters of fire. So what would a wind disaster be? Well, think Hurricane Ian currently went winds up to 150 miles per hour, crashing through central western Florida coast. What is a disaster of water? Would be a flood. You look at currently Melbourne, the suburbs down in Victoria, the New South Wales coast. We are predicted the next 2 weeks to have more rainfall. And the ground here is saturated, the dams are full. Hens Dam, our local dam, sends me an email or a text and it says, "We are currently releasing water." If you're downstream, prepare. So, boy, we've had too much water because Australia is currently in what's called a La Nina, pulling water directly from the west coast of North America over here to Australia. We have too much, they have too little. So, yeah, then what's a kalpa? What's a disaster of fire? He says, in our verse today, he says, kalpa fires jie zhong jin. When they destroy the world entirely, it's because there's another sign at the end of the eon, which is disaster of fire. And it says that it is absolutely part of the climate, that the fires burn all the way up to a level of the heavens. Do you know which heaven survives? Sam, quiz. Do you know which heaven survives? Cliff, anybody? Anybody know? Nobody knows. The inner court of the Tushita heaven doesn't burn. The outer court burns. So the heaven of the four kings, the heaven of the 33 gods, the Suyama heaven, the one we're talking about, and then the outer court of the Tushita heaven all burn. The inner courtyard of the Tushita heaven is where the next Buddha is waiting, Maitreya. He's waiting for the conditions to come ripe. The new world has come into being, and he comes down, so he's safe. How about that? The Buddha is very specific about what we let go of. So, any insurance adjusters listening here, don't issue policies for anything short of the inner court of the Tushita heaven, because you're going to be paying out large dividends to people whose worlds burned, right? So that's when it says jieshao, the fires at the end of the eon. That's what it's talking about. So how about that? And the Buddha describes this totally matter-of-factly. It's not, oh my God, oh, how awful, how does, think of the weatherman with his map on TV trying to describe the fires at the end of the eon. Yes, well, we have reports, Sam, of the fires burning, Jenny, take it to you over on camera 3. So yeah, the fires burn the world, and that's it. But it's not it, because why? Come around again. And the Buddha said, if we had his vision, we would remember how this has happened to us over and over and over and over. It's the way things are, says the Buddha, from his long view, his, extensive vision that he can take into, and he can include in his vision the coming into being and the passing away of entire world systems. This is how it is. Just like, and of course, I can't think of that. I can't imagine, I'm upset when I drop a teacup and it breaks. And the teacup. I was attached to that. And he's saying, never mind your teacup. The world goes away, but it comes back. That's just how it is. Just like a human gets old and dies and is reborn. Okay, we'll take it on your word, Buddha. Thank you for that. So now, that's the first line of the verse today. What about the rest of it? He says, infinite space where worlds float isn't harmed by the fire. Space itself, air, is not a dharma made up of conditions relating to each other. It is a unconditioned dharma. It's a 无缘法, 不是有缘的法. It's an unconditioned dharma, which is to say, it doesn't come into being, doesn't pass away. So the Buddha points to space, to the air, so we can say, you know what? The air is the stage on which the play, this incredible drama of a world coming into being and then burning up, is played out. And he says, okay, you got that image? Got that picture in your mind? Why? Because I want to tell you something about the Buddha's wisdom. 佛智亦如是. The Buddha's wisdom is just the same. Click, click, click. Okay. The Buddha's wisdom is just the same. Why is that important? Why should we care? We should care because that Buddha's wisdom exists inside me and inside you and inside every living being, and it can be cultivated and realized so that, okay, think of this. In Christianity, they talk about the immortal soul. Your immortal soul. That's the thing that you don't want it to fall into hell, and you want it to, they talk about the Holy Roman Empire could send your mortal soul to hell if you didn't pay him with your indulgences, etc. So, and that's, you don't want the devil to get your soul. How many Christian hymns are based on keep your soul away from the devil? So, likewise, in that same scheme, we want our soul to go to heaven. All right. So, the thing about the idea of an immortal soul is there's part of you that doesn't die. Do you think religions know what they're talking about? If that's true, if there is part of me that isn't my body, it isn't my name, it isn't my habits, it's not my cell phone or my email address, it's not my possessions, it's not my relationships, my parents, my kids, my partners, my friends, my enemies, none of those things. And yet, it's so real that when all those other things go away, it survives. What is that? What is that thing? What is that entity inside each of us that doesn't die? That's interesting. Does it have a color? Does it have a name? Can I buy it and sell it? Does anybody else own it? Can I rent it? Can I loan it? What is this thing called 佛智? The Buddha's wisdom is the same. And each of us has a quality of it. Now, it would be inaccurate for me to portray this as something that all Buddhists agree about. There have been, since Buddhism has been in the world for these 2.5 millennia, people have been talking about this. What is the part of you that doesn't die? What's the part of you that survives? And where would it be, inside my body? Over these 2,500 years, people have had different answers to that question within Buddhism. And some call it the 如来藏性, the Tathagata Garbha, the womb of the Buddha, the matrix of the Buddha. That's a name for it. Other Buddhist schools have said, no, there's nothing. There's nothing at all. In Brahmanism, what do they say? It is Brahman, that it's called the Godhead. And when you die, you go back to that Godhead. And then a spark comes forward. And in Judaism, they talk about the Ein Sof. They talk about there is a quality that broke. Sparks of that vessel came down to earth. And our job as mensch, as righteous humans, is to gather back the sparks of that all in all, that thing, right? So thoughtful, clear-minded people, since history began, ask these questions. Is there something in me that doesn't die? And Forest of Vigor, Jing Jinlin, Bodhisattva, would say to us, think of when the fires burn at the end of the kalpa, the world is gone. What survives the fire? Nothing. And yet something is reborn. He says the Buddha nature is the same. Empty space doesn't go away, even though it's the host of that disaster, the ashes of the world that burned. The Buddha nature inside of us doesn't go away. And there's the unspoken part, which is get in touch with it. Look into that. That's worthwhile. That's even more important than the World Cup. And there are people who I know who every 4 years, 5 years, think the World Cup is it. I was raised without football, soccer. I didn't even less cricket. Here in Australia, cricket's big. The World Cup is big. Europe, the World Cup is the number one celebration of our team, our side. And that's all ahead of me. I can learn about that. I wasn't raised at that. For me, it was baseball. I was a baseball guy. So anyway, when the fire burns the world away, everybody gonna pray to the heavens on the judgment day. You can speak about the great King David. You can preach about the wisdom of Saul. Men shall know and men shall see. We all are brothers and we all are free. Mankind was made of clay, each of us in the very same way. Get ready, brother, for that day. Everybody going to pray. Because the fire is going to burn, right? And that's where the preacher goes. It's going to burn. That fire is hot. You better repent while you have the chance, sinner. Oh, my goodness. Every church on Sunday morning has that message. And so people have been thinking, and even more now. Boy, oh boy, look at the popular entertainments. So many zombie movies, right? Zombie movies and TV shows. Oof. That's a popular culture that is worried about the end, the zombie apocalypse. And the Buddha says, absolutely true. Absolutely. The world will end. Meanwhile, before it does, I would like to remind you, says the Buddha, that you have options. If you take a look at that Buddha nature, it doesn't go away. And once you realize it, once you once you realize the Tao, likewise, you don't have to burn up and forget everything and come back again and be confused, and you can step out of that cycle. So interesting message here. We got one more verse, before Forest of Vigor is done. So this is right. These praises, right? Praises of the Buddha's wisdom. Here we go. Ready? 如是方众生各取虚空相，诸佛亦如是。世间妄分别. Like living beings in the 10 directions, each of them clings to the appearance of space. Buddhas are just the same. Ordinary people falsely make distinctions. These are so non-musical. Okay, just like Chinese, take a look. 如十方众生, just like 10 directions, sentient beings. Why 10? It includes above and below. So you think the 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, 4 intermediates, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, then add above and below, zenith and nadir. You get 10. Like beings in all 10 directions, and that includes those with feathers, those with fins, those with fur, those with scales, those with wings, those that are no-footed, think snakes, that are two-footed, think the bipeds, the quadrupeds, the four-footed, and the many-footed, think, caterpillars. Like beings in all directions. Guqi, each clings to empty space appearances. So just the way we, in a vast, empty stage, make business for ourselves. Each of us grabs different stuff. 诸佛亦如是, the Buddhas likewise are the same. 世间, the world falsely discriminates them, discerns them. What does that mean? Like beings in the 10 directions clinging to the appearances in space. Better translation. Each of them clings to various things. We cling to various things in the midst of space. Buddhas are those things that we cling to. We make distinctions about the Buddhas. Why is he talking about that? That's interesting, huh? That Jing Jinlin, bodhisattva, wants to sing about that. All right, take a look at my desktop here. There's a Buddha, sort of in space. He's actually next to my cabin at this point. He doesn't live there now. He's moved to our stupa yard. But there's a Buddha. That's an appearance of Buddhas that some living beings attach to. Here's another. Let's pick this one. There we go. Now, it's a head of a Buddha, and it's nice to have them in bodies, but what is this? This is a Gandhara area Buddha, which is where it's right now is next to Afghanistan. It's actually on the Silk Route in Kyrgyzstan, pretty much, or Pakistan. Gandhara is what is Pakistan. So Western India, south of Russia, next to Afghanistan, north of Iran. That's where this Buddha was made in the 4th century. Right? What does it look like? Boy, he looks like a European. He certainly does. It's a Buddha, and there's not much left, right? His head's been smashed, his body's been smashed. But those features are Eastern European, Western Hellenistic. It's like Indian, Greek, Iranian features, and it's a Buddha. So, in Xu Kong Xiang, right inside of empty space, we visualize human perfection in different ways. So interesting. That is not the way most Chinese friends of mine would think of the Buddha. How about that one? Here we go. This is not the Buddha, this is a bodhisattva. You can tell by the hairstyle. But look at that. Look at that nose. That's a European nose. That's a Mediterranean nose. And you can see the blessings, got nice rounded features. Interesting. This is the way an artist saw the Buddha and cast him in clay. That's a Buddha. Interesting. I've got another one. Take a look here. All right. How do you visualize perfection? This is clearly a Buddha because of the head dress, showing his wisdom, the third eye in the middle of his forehead, his long earlobes. If we could see the rest of his body, we would see 32 hallmarks. 32相, 32大江湖相, the 32 hallmarks of a Mahapurusha, a great being. But we don't have the rest of his body, that's all that's left. So, this is how some artist visualized a Buddha for his community. Where was it? Afghanistan. People think, oh, Taliban? Terrorist Buddhas? ISIS? Nah. That's a later development in Afghanistan. You know the Bamiyan Buddhas that were destroyed, in fact, by the Taliban? Those are from the same area. Those huge, huge statues of the Buddha that were finally killed with mortar fire, those are Gandhara Buddhas. What's unique about this? Everybody goes, mustache. That's an image of the Buddha that was, notice the halo, Yuanguang, notice the hair, also the serenity. Notice that's a very calm, inward-looking individual. We got his body, still intact. Here he is, standing. So, he doesn't look Korean, he doesn't look Japanese, doesn't look Tibetan, doesn't look Chinese, but that's a Buddha. And you think, what will Buddhas, as soon as there's a Buddha here in Australia, what will he look like? As soon as there's a Buddha in Canada, what will he look like? Could there be a Buddha in Cleveland? I wonder, maybe. Or, Sao Paulo, or Dublin. The next Buddha, how will he look? They'll be making statues of him. How interesting. All right. So let's return now to our verse and I put it away. There it is. Like living beings in all directions, each one of them clinging to an appearance of the Buddha in space. We all visualize the Buddha differently. Buddhas are, likewise, something that don't actually resemble any of the things that we, Wang Fen Bie, we falsely make distinctions between. Okay, now, all right. My question is, how do you visualize the Buddha? Everybody look right past my right shoulder, this one. There's a Buddha. There he is. That is Piru Janafo, Vairochana Buddha. You can tell by his mudra. And notice down here below him, here's a Buddha too, little one, that's Amitabha. So different Buddhas with different mudras. In this case, Vairochana he is the teacher of the Avatamsaka Sutra. That's what he expounded. We mostly identify Vairochana with that sutra. The Buddha here, the little one standing with two bodhisattvas, that's Amitabha. He's the teacher of the Pure Land Dharma, the Pure Land of the West, Sukhavati, Jila Shijie. Different Buddha, different teachings. To this side is Manjushri, to this side is Samantabhadra, Dazhi Wenshu Pusa, Da Heng Puxian Pusa. They support Vairochana. Okay, what are you looking at? You're looking at the way Buddhas appear inside a Buddhist monastery in the Chinese Mahayana tradition, Hanchuan Fojiao. 就看这个华严三圣就如此. The sages of the Avatamsaka look like this. However, as we saw, this has not always been the case. Buddhas look different, each according to the culture where Buddhism took root. Our teacher, Master Xuanhua, was a reformer. He was critical of the institutions that grew in the country he was most familiar with China. And he was critical because he talked about stagnation, that the Dharma got stagnated. And once that's inevitable, any religion, once it's been in a culture for, it usually takes about 200 years, it starts to develop institutions which can't change with the times and the needs any further. That's true worldwide. It happened in China with Buddhism. And so Master Hua was known as the Yumei Gaoseng, the noble monk who came to America. And coming to America where there's no Buddhism at all, people don't know who the Buddha is, they've never heard the Dharma, they can't identify the Sangha. So that's tough if you're trying to plant the seeds of the Dharma down, but it's also a gift, because why? You're not struggling with tradition. You don't have to have anybody looking over your shoulder and saying, that's not the way we do it. Tradition. Anybody saw Fiddler on the Roof? Tradition. You have to do it this way because why? That's the way it's done. It's always been done that way. You don't want to do it any different. What a burden, what a weight. What if the tradition has choked off the life of the teaching? Well, tradition. You have to defend tradition. So Master Hua didn't have to struggle with that in America. He could start fresh. And he said, what I am teaching you is not Chinese Buddhism. He said, what I'm teaching you is not Japanese Buddhism, Korean Buddhism, Sri Lankan, Indian, Mongolian, Tibetan, Nepalese, right? Buddhism. I'm teaching you the teaching of living beings. He said, we're even going to change the name. We're not going to call it Buddhism. I'm teaching you depth psychology. I'm teaching you the wisdom of living beings, he said, the Buddha's wisdom. It has no country, it has no culture, it has no form, it has no style, it has no institutions. It comes from Xin Di, the ground of the mind, your mind. And he said that therefore some of you will play banjos. Ha, he said. And he said, I want you to change the robe. We haven't done that yet. I want you to change the ceremonies. We're in the process of changing our ceremonies. You have to accord with the conditions and the culture and the time of the place where you live. Otherwise, you're just working out of a museum. You're working out of a library. You're always looking back. How can you possibly meet the needs of the people in front of you if you're only looking back and saying, this is how it's been done, this is how it has to be done? So that is the attitude of someone who can truly plant down a living tradition and watch the seeds come up out of the ground where you are. In this case, Australia. When Master Hua got to San Francisco, it was California, the land of the Golden Gate. And by golly, Master Hua was so far ahead of the times that even we couldn't catch up with him. His mind was synthetic. His mind was fertile and interested in listening and learning to what people needed in America. As a result, when he got to America, what did he teach? He spent a lot of time talking about becoming better people. So he taught us the teachings of Confucius, 儒家的思想, 儒道. And because why? Confucius's project was humanity, not transcendence, transcending suffering. And so by day, Master Hua taught us about being better children to our parents, being better parents to our children, called filiality. So we learned a lot about repaying people's kindness. It was called 知恩报恩, recognize the goodness that has been done to you and then pay it back. That's the first lesson of a good human being. Then you look sideways and you look at your brothers and sisters. You learn fraternity after you learn filiality. He taught us about our relationship to the planet around us and said, if you really want to talk about compassion, if you want that freedom that understands Tong Ti Da Bei, same body shared with all living beings, he said, start by looking at your diet. He said, eat harmlessly. If you can nourish your body in a way that doesn't increase suffering, do that. That's a good thing to do. So every creature loves its own body. So eat in a way that decreases harm, he said. So with that in mind, I want to share with you something brand new. Here we go. Here it is. Talking Vegetable Vows. My colleague and co-writer Brian is responsible for this. It's his fault. No. While meditating in the garden one day, I swear I heard a potato say, "When I grow big, I want to feed a young whippersnapper who will leave home one day and become a Dharma master. He can bake me," says the potato. "He can bake me, he can boil me, he can mash me in a pot, French fry me, freeze dry me, or make me into a tater tot. What an honor it would be for a spud like me if it could be my destiny to help a monk enter samadhi. Hear the vows of the vegetables. They rejoice in our good roots. And when conditions ripen, living beings will reap the fruits." You think vegetables care about who eats them? Now, a few rows over lived a broccoli named Sue. She said, "If a spud can make a vow, then I can too. What a blessing it would be to feed a bhikshuni who will speak the proper dharma for you and me." Okay, broccoli. "She can cook me in a stir fry and pad thai or souffle. She can just eat me raw. I'm more nutritious that way. I'm good for digestion. I'm great for cultivation, full of strength and vigor and broccoli motivation. Hear the vows of the vegetables. They rejoice in our good roots. And when conditions ripen, living beings will reap the fruits." Then up popped a cabbage with a good head on his shoulder. He looked up at the broccoli, and this is what he told her. "When harvest time comes and the weather starts to worsen, I'll be a wholesome feast for a devout layperson." Cabbage, right? "You can shred me, you can braise me, put me in a casserole. If you think you got the nerve, stuff me in a spring roll. Whip up a batch of coleslaw or some homemade sauerkraut. Or corned beef and cabbage, just leave the beef out. Hear the vows of the vegetables. They rejoice in our good roots. When conditions ripen, living beings will reap the fruits." Soon every vegetable in the garden made a solemn vow to feed the whole world in accord with the Tao. With their roots planted firmly and hearts of compassion, these vegetables made vows to feed all in their fashion. Takes a single seed to grow the tallest tree. Plant the seeds of Bodhi, one day you'll be free. Plant the seeds in the springtime, reap the harvest in the fall. Nurture your good roots, your blessings will grow tall. Hear the vows of the vegetables, they rejoice in our good roots. And when conditions ripen, living beings will reap the fruits. I'm going to have to break to move this forward multiple times, but that's the way it goes. Hold on here. There we go. Here we go. While meditating in a garden one day, I swear I heard a potato say, "When I grow big, I want to feed a young whippersnapper who will leave home one day to become a Dharma master. He can bake me, he can boil me, he can mash me in a pot, French fry me, freeze dry me, make me a tater tot. But what an honor it would be for a spud like me if it could be my destiny to help a monk enter samadhi. Hear the vows of the vegetables, they rejoice in our good roots. And when conditions ripen, living beings will reap the fruits. Now, a few rows over lived a broccoli named Sue. She said, if a spud can make a vow, then I can too. What a blessing it would be to feed a bhikshuni who will speak the proper dharma for you and me. She can cook me in a stir-fry, in a pad thai or souffle. She can eat me raw, I'm more nutritious that way. I'm good for digestion and great for cultivation, full of strength and vigor and broccoli motivation. Hear the vows of the vegetables, they rejoice in our good roots. And when conditions ripen, living beings will reap the fruits. Cabbage comes next. Then up popped a cabbage with a good head on his shoulder. He looked up at the broccoli. This is what he told her. When harvest time comes and the weather starts to worsen, I'll be a wholesome feast for a devout lay person. You can shred me, you can braise me, put me in a casserole. If you think you have the nerve, stuff me in a spring roll. Whip up a batch of coleslaw or some homemade sauerkraut or corned beef and cabbage, just leave the beef out. Hear the vows of the vegetables, they rejoice in our good roots. And when conditions ripen, living beings will reap the fruits. Soon every vegetable in the garden made a solemn vow to feed the whole world in accord with the Tao, with their roots planted firmly and hearts of compassion. Those vegetables made vows to feed all in their fashion. Well, it takes a single seed to grow the tallest tree. Plant the seeds of Bodhi, one day you'll be free. Plant seeds in the springtime, reap the harvest in the fall. Nurture your good roots, your blessings will grow tall. Hear the vows of the vegetables, they rejoice in our good roots. And when conditions ripen, living beings will reap the fruits. Well, there you go. Brian's fault. Now, do vegetables talk? You know. One of the benefits of eating vegetables is after you've eaten them, they don't talk in your stomach. They digest pretty happily. So. All right. So the question remains, how do you visualize the Buddha? What appearance in empty space do you have for the Buddha? And it's a real question. Today we had a number of friends visit Redwood Vihara, our new monastery down in the Santa Cruz Redwoods, one of the very few places in the entire world where sequoia trees grow. In this case, they're Sequoia sempervirens. They're not Sequoia gigantea, which is the Sierra redwood. These are the coastal redwoods, and they only grow from Santa Cruz to the Oregon border. That's it. 5% of the redwood trees that once lived survive. 95% are gone. And Master Hua, with foresight, bought 500 acres of coastal redwoods way back 50 years ago. And we have now developed a monastery where we will be creating Western-friendly modes for men and in the future for women to train to enter the Buddhist Sangha. So I spent a year there back in 2000 working on my doctoral dissertation. So I've been through the winter in the Santa Cruz Redwoods. It's cold and damp and dark and green and red. Boy, oh boy. What an amazing place. The air you can imagine, it's perfumed with these beings. Think of a tree as a sentient creature that has been standing minimum 300 years, maximum. Some of the oldest ones were alive when Jesus was doing carpentry jobs, So quite astounding how old these are and how aware you really have the feeling. The redwoods communicate under the surface of the topsoil, talk to each other, and they breathe together and communicate together. When one tree is ailing, the other trees send nutrients to it. The research now about the network of communication in a forest is just stunning. And we cut them down just at our peril. So anyway, building our new Bodhimanda there, our new place to practice, one of the issues is which Buddha is going to stand. Which Buddha will be in the Buddha hall, the main Buddha there. We need an image, right? Like here we have Vairochana and the Huayan Sansheng, the three sages of the Avatamsaka. There needs to be a Buddha. So we had one Buddha that we looked at, and it was from Burma. It wasn't from Myanmar, it was from Burma. Myanmar came along later politically, it's Burma. And it is if I was raised in a Burmese Buddhist tradition, I would want that Buddha. He's wearing a sarong, and it looks like a skirt. And anybody who looks at it says, oh, Buddha's wearing a dress? No, it's a sarong. And it's very beautiful, but to my eyes, it's like, I'm not familiar with the Buddha in a sarong. So, and it's a fantastic image. It just came to us through a family who wanted to donate. And we looked at it and said, golly, that's terrific. How many Burmese Buddhists are going to come and recognize that image? Let's not put that in the centers. Okay, fine. So we decided maybe that we'll find another spot close by for that image. The image in the middle has to ground the monastery. It has to anchor the whole place. Everything else circulates around that main Buddha image. So a Mahayana temple, not a monastery, but a temple in downtown Oakland, California, closed not long ago, I guess 15 years ago, because the elder bhikshuni who was there passed away. She was just too old. And she had a standard temple, very nice Buddha house and Buddha image and bowing cushions, and it was a living community there. And after she passed away, before she passed away, she said, I would like to donate everything here intact to the University of California. So the Buddhist department at UC Berkeley came into possession of an entire Buddhist monastery. All of the tables, the images, all of the paraphernalia. And Professor Scharf, who is currently the chair, good friend of the monastery, said it's all packed up. We took a table out that we could use in our meeting space, but the rest has no value for us, per se. Would you like it? We know you're developing places. So we thought, oh, lovely, thank you. So we took it, opened up. The Buddha image came out, And everybody looked at it and said, it's not right either. That one's not right. Not quite right. We are uncertain whether it's interestingly, it's a feminine Buddha image. And I'm sure the bhikshuni who owned it originally, who didn't own it, who invited it in, was thrilled with it because it probably responded. But we looked at it and said, that's not it either. And everything about it is fine. It's a wonderful image. It's just not, everyone who looked at it said, that probably won't be it. So, what have we come up with? The decision was made today that the images for our new monastery will be these. These are Ming Dynasty Sanrulai, the three Tathagatas, Shakyamuni, Medicine Buddha, and Amitabha. These images have been in the world since the Ming Dynasty. We haven't dated them precisely, but they're probably 400 years old. And they are powerful images. They're Chinese. They are just splendid images. He sits on, as you're facing it, to your left with his arm here. He sits to your right with his arm here. And they've lived hard lives. They've been bumped and bruised, and there's lots of when they were offered to us, they were living in a mowing shed on a hillside in Southern California, covered with grass, cobwebs. The original collector, a Chinese gentleman who was an antique dealer, had a sense for Buddha images, but he collected them and then passed away. And so they were down there, and his family felt bad about that. They said, we think they should probably be in a place where people know what they are and can, treat them correctly. So we would be happy to put the, So as our monastery down in Redwood Valley was developing, we thought we need a Buddha image. Well, they showed up. 3 Ming Dynasty Buddhas at the same time that we needed one for the main altar. And today we've agreed that these 3 Buddhas will be protecting the redwood forest as Santa Cruz Redwoods will be protecting these Buddhas. So that's the plan. And so, Forest of Vigor Bodhisattva says, living beings, each in their own way, conceive of the Buddha. We cling to those appearances in the midst of empty space. But the Buddha's wisdom has no such appearances. He is indeed like empty space. You can go ahead and visualize him as you please, the way you would like to. But don't attach. Here's, let's see here. This is the new, I should be careful and not show you an image that doesn't. Okay, here is Professor Verhoeven, my former colleague Bhikshu Heng Chao, speaking, making a joke for the monks and for the community. Here are the redwoods. Here is Marty taking a look at this is the scene at Redwood Vihara. So it's going to be a wonderful place to cultivate. All right, there we go. This is the Burmese Buddha that I mentioned. I don't know if I can enlarge this. Can I enlarge it? There we go. Notice it's...
Dharma Master, we can't see the screen.
Oh, you can't see the screen? Why do I do that? Thank you for telling me. Here's the Buddha that is... It's lovely, it's fantastic, it's not going to resonate with people not from the culture. This is what I wanted to show you all. Here is the scene. This is the environment. The redwoods of Santa Cruz, those sentient beings as old as that. And so this is the new Buddha Hall, and we've now the Ming Buddhas. This is the more feminine image that is also not quite, it's not an image that we respond with the way these Ming Dynasty Buddhas will. So we're thrilled to have that decision made, and the Buddhas will be on their way down in short order. And then living beings can cling to those appearances in empty space. They arrived just before COVID, so 3 years ago. They've been there in the Buddha Hall, and people will be upset to see them leave, but we'll just say, well, come on down to Santa Cruz. Those Buddhas have survived through centuries. They've probably got centuries to go. So, alrighty, so we've heard about vegetables. You're not sharing it, there we go. We've heard about the fires at the end of the Kalpa. And let me give you a preview. Coming up, the next set of verses is Forest of Strength, Li, Lin, Pusa. And what does he talk about? He talks about the skandhas. Here's the word, skandhas, this word right here. What are the skandhas? The skandhas are a contemplation of what makes up the human personality. What makes you, you, and different from your parents, and different from your sisters, and different from your dogs, and your brothers, and your employers. The skandhas. The skandha is a Sanskrit word that means components, or literally heaps, like piles of stuff. So it's your body and your mind. Those are the skandhas. And this bodhisattva talks about personality, and where you come from, and where you go, and why I am this way. Why are you unhappy with your hair the way it is? Why do you always feel jealous of your older brother, etc., etc.? Those are all the skandhas, and he talks about that in 10 verses, and he praises the Buddha's wisdom in giving us this way of understanding our lives. This is the Buddha Dharma. This is what the teaching is really about. It's not superstition. Nothing could be less superstitious than an analysis of body and mind. Why are things not working out for me? Well, the answer is found in the skandhas. Why am I having a good day today? Why are things really just, I'm on top of the world? It's in the physical components, the feelings, the thoughts, the deeper structures of the mind, and consciousness itself. This is not philosophy. It's not conjecture about the nature of the world compared to somebody else's conjecture. This is the Buddha saying, you want to know where you came from? Here it is. This is why. You want to make a better world for yourself? Here's how. That's the Buddha Dharma. That's the teaching of the Mahayana. And it's done in the context of all living beings, relating to the biosphere as family. So, what's the righteous way to live? How does a mensch live, a righteous person? How does a jiangfu live, a junzi in Chinese, the superior person? He lives consciously in a way to enhance the well-being of all with whom we are related, and that's everybody. Yeah, thank you, Mahayana Buddha Dharma. So, I started out this talk today saying most textbooks don't even mention the Bodhisattva path. Well, this textbook, the Avatamsaka Sutra, is about that. So if you want to learn more about how to live righteously in the world, study Chinese and come help us translate the Avatamsaka Sutra. You don't even have to study Chinese. You can just put the English into practice and you've done the job. Okay, I want to share. Let's see here. I'll turn it over to Jin Chuan or Jin Wei Shi, and then I've got the trailer for Ted's film. It's only 1 minute and 20 seconds long, so let's share my screen. Jin Chuan, Jin Wei Shi, you want to tell us about what's afoot? What's going on?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm tofu.
Okay.
So first is the movie that Dharma Master just mentioned, and he's going to show a trailer for, The Mountain Path. The movie is by Ted Berger, who was famous for making the movie Amongst White Clouds. It inspired many people to cultivate the way, Jing Wei-shi being one of them. He said he actually watched it as a spiritual practice.
It's true. Even didn't understand English at all, but the pictures and the atmosphere of the movie is very inspiring, and unique.
So people have time. November 1st, 6:30 to 8:30, we have a special screening online, and it's actually no charge. So
Okay, for those of us, I'm going to cut in here. For those of us here, 6:30 p.m. in California is 11:30 a.m. on November 2nd. That's 11:30 a.m. here, November 2nd. And we're going to be talking with the filmmaker, the man who made the film. And here it is. Ready? Here's the, let's see, optimize for a video clip. Here we go. This is the trailer for the movie.
Did you know that animals listen to dominating tactics
Never mind
because they're scared?
Okay.
China. I had a simple plan. When I was 23, I boarded a plane for China. I had a simple plan. To learn Mandarin and then find an old hermit in the mountains who could teach me all about this thing I'd discovered called Zen.
Zen. On the trail of Zen.
师傅，为什么在山里修行？跟我们说一下。
为什么在山中修行？
你现在这个思想是，他还是那个道行，你知道吗？他是有那种道行。
要有道行。You gotta have a Dao mind, mindful way.
那时候一般不太接待，那去了也许年不看。
等着我下来，我把你们带上去，我带下去可以。人在世界上忙，为什么忙？眼看着眼前，跟那眼前花样的，老认为它是实在的、可靠的。
I walked into these mountains with a lot of questions about life, about meaning.
I walked into these mountains with a lot of questions about life, about meaning.
Can these people who live so far from the world teach me something about how to live in it?
Can these people who live in these mountains so far from the world teach me something about how to live in it?
这复活84000法，就是希望令一切众生坚持本性。
你只要好好脚踏实地去修。
All right, that's The Mountain Path. That's Ted Berger's film. We're not going to show the film on November 2nd. We're going to talk about it, November 1st, for those of you in Northern California. We'll be discussing the film. I'll be asking him questions. Ted is an old friend of the monastery, and he's going to, this is a, you could say it's a part of an advertisement so that folks will be interested in the movie and then seek it out. And then Now let's see. Is the movie going to be? We are going to show the film. Is that right or not?
Yeah, I believe you're showing the film.
Okay, we will see the film. I take it back. The film will be available to watch, and you can see it's well translated. The monks speak Chinese. It's been translated into English very skillfully. That will be on subtitles on the film. So, here you go. Next. Oop, hold on. We're going to go back here. There we go. Okay, moving forward.
So we still have a series of talks, the Forum on Ancient Wisdom in Modern Life. This is being held through CDTV, through a group, I think, posted by Reverend Heng Shi, Dr. Ye, and so forth. If you scroll down, Dharma Master, you can see the list of speakers. Yeah. So I think the upcoming talk is Dharma Master, I don't know how to say her name, Dejia?
Dejia, yeah.
Dejia, by Mrs. Nancy Chu will be moderating. And she has a lot of experience in hospice. She's a bhikshuni who has spent a lot of time in hospice work. So it'll be very interesting to hear her experiences.
I'm gonna jump in again. This is tomorrow at 12:30. 12:30 tomorrow. That is to say, Monday, for those of us here in Australia, China, Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia. 12:30 here in the Brisbane time zone. 10:30 a.m. for those of you in China, Singapore, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Taiwan. It's a wonderful talk because this bhikshuni, Dejia Fashi, in Taiwan she has pioneered a new way of hospice care, palliative care for those on the point of death, the mystery of life and death. She's going to be speaking in Chinese, and we will have a translator. The young woman introducing her is Nancy Zhu, who is currently studying. She's in her doctoral program at Stanford. Nancy has made a special study of hospice care and has a friendship with Bhikshuni Dejia. So this is a really special opportunity to hear about Buddhist perspective on end of life. I will be listening tomorrow, 12:30. Let's see, how do we get there? Here is on YouTube. If you go to berkeleymonastery.org, that's the website we're on right now. Click on this link. You can watch it on YouTube. If you can't get YouTube, click on this link. It'll take you to the Zoom call. And so you'll find that information here. Okay? All right. Next.
We still have our regular meditations at the monastery, Thursdays and Fridays, 6:15 to 7:15 in the mornings, and 5:15 to 6:15 in the evenings. If you come, just please wear at least a surgical mask, and we're happy to have you join. We actually have been having more and more meditators now.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a good time if you want to just find a peaceful place in Berkeley to sit.
And don't miss opportunity to enjoy the three Buddhas who pretty soon will move to new home.
That's right. The Buddhas are in transit. So there's an online form here if you want to join. That way, and you only have to do that once. Once we know you, you're welcome to return anytime.
Next, we have an event coming up also very soon, Thursday, October 20th. Translation as spiritual practice? ? People haven't thought about translation as a way to practice. This is being hosted by Reverend Heng Shi, and exploring the way that translation can be used as spiritual practice.
Yep, and it's Friday here in Australia, Friday, 12:30 p.m., just afternoon. If you're in Taiwan or China or Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, 10:30 a.m. Friday for that talk. Now, they, at the time, interestingly, they said no translation, English only, haha. So I said, can we work on that? So I'm not sure whether or not that will have a translation. They're hoping to get a translator. So.
Yeah. Then the rest are pretty much our regular activities. So Friday nights, Marty's continuing to lecture. Our Great Compassion mantra will be at the end of the month on Sunday morning. You can sign up to join in. Our daily ceremonies are still streaming every day. Jing Forsher's lecture, reciting the Buddha's name at 12:30. Where Heng Sure has his lecture on Friday, 1 to 2.
Okay.
And Stephen Tainer has his class on Wednesday nights.
Great.
On mindfulness.
Hold up. Okay.
So it's a full Dharma program.
Yeah, I saw the stained glass window that you showed at the end of Marty's lecture today. That was quite marvelous.
We don't that's also going to be installed pretty soon.
Yeah, I won't ask for that, a picture of that now. We'll get that later. But,
okay, I'll send it to you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the big adornment of the Buddha Hall at Redwood Vihara coming up. Hongmu Chanlin in Chinese, Redwood Vihara. Great. Okay, that's it. Are we done?
Yeah. Also, just to mention, we don't have it up on the website yet, but people would like to do Tai Chi. We're also thinking of starting that up again at the monastery. So we're going to put a form online for people to sign up. Fu Tong, who has been teaching at BBM for many years, for decades, will be starting up again with, just being extra cautious with COVID and such. But we want to support people's physical well-being and practice. So that will be being posted probably shortly.
Okay, good. I'm going to click on this far right link here called Dharma Radio, which will take you out to the Dharma Radio website and remind people that if you do a good deed, you go to Good Karma Music here, tell us what you did, share your good deed, hit submit post, and you get your pick of Buddhist and Catholic spiritual music, as well as storytelling. And we get to read your good deed. I listened more than I spoke in a meeting today because the person really needed to talk. I practice kindness while listening and not evaluating them. We will send you music for that. That's a good deed indeed. Share this. Kim, Las Vegas. I pick up broken glass bottles that people deliberately spread on forest trails and mountainous areas. Can you imagine? People break glass and spread it on a forest trail so you'll hurt yourself. It harms the poor animals and cyclists. Picking up trash and glass has been a favorite pastime. My contribution in this effort makes me feel at that moment I'm not living in vain. I can be useful. So there is one of the many stories from Good Karma Music. If you go out to Instagram, if that's something you do, look at Good Karma Music, and you'll find many more of these stories with beautiful illustrations from our staff. All righty. Yes, indeed. Dharma Radio Music, it's called. That's the link you want. Jerry has given it. Here we are. Dharma Radio Music on Instagram. You see all the wonderful posts. There's 25 of them. Every one of these stories is inspiring, and we're so happy to share music as we get the chance. Okay, Dharma Radio Music on Instagram. All right, we will conclude today's lecture with Medicine Buddha's mantra. This is a transference, so please make a wish. Send your good wishes out to the world any way that you would like to do so. We use Medicine Buddha's mantra to do that, and it gives that all of those wishes an extra boost for healing. Ouch, ouch, ouch. So it also protects from all kinds of pandemic bugs, viruses. A heart that is full of Medicine Buddha's mantra is a heart full of light, and the shadows that contribute to illness don't land. They don't stop with you. So it's a wonderful spiritual practice that has physical benefits. Here we go. Please make a wish. Arahate samyak sambuddhaya tathata om saji saji saja samukate swaha Prabarachaya Tathagata Arahate samyak sambuddhaya Tathagata Saji saji saja samukate swaha Prabarachaya Tathagata Arahate samyak sambuddhaya. Here we go, last chance. Saji saji saja samukate swaha. Invite you to join us in bowing to the Buddha if you care to do that. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. That will do it for us for today. See you all next week. Stay healthy, stay well. Amitofo. Bye-bye.